Hey there everyone, and welcome to Let's Play VVVVVV. Okay, I'm sure you've noticed that this isn't really a Let's Play, this is actually a run-through of No Death Mode. And I'm going to be providing commentary. Kind of, it's more gonna be like rambling about random stuff related to VVVVVV, maybe. Anyway, if you're familiar with the other games that I've played on this channel, you might be thinking that VVVVVV isn't nearly as difficult as what I've put up with. And this is true. But there's a reason for that. VVVVVV has way too many fucking save points. I mean, I say this from the perspective of someone who likes to really be challenged. And I know that the save points being so frequent in this game are one of the reasons that it's really accessible and really widely enjoyed. The other is that it's very well designed. And this really comes through when you start grinding the levels for a no death mode run. And you start realizing just how well each room is laid out to work with Captain Viridian's movement. Now, the other reason that this game is much more difficult than you might think is because Captain Viridian moves extremely quickly. On the ground, he moves horizontally fast, but vertically in the air, he moves incredibly fast. And dealing with his vertical movement, well, not dying, is essentially the main challenge of a no-death run. Anyway, we are now running through space. I have no idea why this portion of the game exists. When I first played VVVVVV, I thought that that the game was going to be more of a exploration-based Metroidvania sort of progression. It's not. It's really just a bunch of discrete levels that you go through, which is fine, but I was really kind of disappointed because I had my hopes up for something more exploration-based. And really, I have never found much of value in this whole space section. Most of the screens are really empty, have nothing going on. There's a couple trinkets hidden here and there, but that doesn't really justify all of this open space. Yeah, I don't know. It's really just a waste of time in a no-death run, and it exists only to make me find the quickest routes through it to get to the levels. Anyway, I always start with the warp zone. The warp zone is rather disorienting compared to regular gameplay. Going back and forth across the borders of the screen is not something normal, and the brain doesn't take it too well. But the main reason that I always start here is because the end of it is very difficult, and we'll get to that in a bit. It's not too hard before then. Most of these screens are pretty simple if you can get past the screen boundary mechanics. And they mostly take care of themselves. Dealing with the screen boundaries is really just an exercise in knowing where to look at any given time and training your eyes to move when they need to. And the difficult part is going to start now. First off, every warp that you go through causes the screen to shake. And for me, at least, this is incredibly disorienting. I hate screen shake. There's some screen shake in Toho, and I really detest it. Second, this room is really disorienting. But this is the real culprit. This room caused many, many deaths in No Death Mode, which was always annoying. You could even call it heartbreaking, haha. But this final jump here is the reason. That's a very, very narrow, precise jump, and I died on it far too many times. This room is really tricky if you don't know what's going on, but if you know when to move, it's very simple. And there we go. I got my first crew member. I don't know who he is because he's not Viridian and he's not Fuck You Vermilion. More on Fuck You Vermilion later. Oh yay, we get to waste more time running aimlessly through space now. So the second level I always do is the tower. This one isn't as hard and fast as the warp zone. There's nothing in it that is as challenging or disorienting as the last screens of the warp zone. But it does have a few characteristics that make me want to take it on earlier rather than later. One of the defining characteristics of VVVVVV as a whole is that it's a screen-based game. What this means is that on most screens, you can start running forward and make specific movements from the moment you enter the screen, and if you don't stop, you'll make it out on the other end alright. And even if you miss those movements, then you can stop, catch your breath, and use a backup movement set through the screen to complete it. On the tower, you're not really given this chance, because it scrolls at a set speed. This means that you can't just rely on a non-stop charge through the stage to complete it, because if you do, you'll hit the top of the screen and you'll die. But likewise, if you screw up something, if you miss a movement, if you don't do something properly, you don't have an awful lot of time to set yourself down and figure out what you're going to do instead. And finally, the constant scrolling requires you to stop a lot, and this is bad for muscle memory. Because a lot of the screens in this game for me are now based on muscle memory. And when I get my muscle memory going, then it's good. But when I make it stop, I have to turn it up again. There's always a bit of a risk there that I'm going to screw up. But thankfully, the tower is not too long, and nothing in it is too terribly difficult. But these factors make it so I can't really trivialize much of it either. It's all a low level of challenge, which means that I want to get it out of the way early, because that means there's more areas I can potentially screw up on. And there we go! Hey there, Vermilion! Fuck you. So, next we move on to the first intermission, which are going to be the bane of every no-death player's existence. Indeed, when I first started practicing for a no-death run, I thought that the intermissions were going to be the hardest part. I was only half right. This intermission really isn't too bad, as long as you understand the mechanics behind moving your buddy down there. I'll share a story from when I first played this game, to illustrate. When I first played this game, I didn't understand the mechanics of how you were supposed to do this intermission. I thought that Vermilion just stayed behind you the entire time, regardless of whether you were on the ceiling or the floor. I'm not entirely certain how I managed to not notice how the mechanics actually work, but there you go. If you're trying to make him follow behind you the entire time on the ground, then many of these rooms are extremely difficult. But if you actually understand the mechanics, then a lot of them are trivialized. Like these last two look kind of tricky, but if you follow the method I just used, then they're both essentially trivial. This screen, however, is tricky no matter what you do. These platforms move fast. You can't hesitate when going along the bottom of them, or you will ram into the spikes. Likewise, you have to time your buddy's movement properly. If you rest on the bottom platform just a bit too long, he's going to run into the spikes, and you're going to cry a lot because you're already like halfway through the game here. Yes, that happened to me a couple of times. How'd you go? Finally, we've got this up and down moving platform. It's actually probably the most difficult part of the intermission. The timing to start moving to clear the second half of the platform is pretty precise. And then we've got a screen here that it only exists to waste time. Yay. Yeah, I've actually talked about a lot of these screens individually. I guess this intermission is kind of slow going, but it's not too bad. We will save our ire for intermission 2, eventually. But now it's time to move on to my third area. First, I'm going to forget how to get to the space station 2. I must have been out of it, wow. Oh, here we go. That's right. Move to the left. That's good. So, the space station 2 is hidden pretty much as far away from the starting area as possible, which is a pain in the ass. And it makes you go through this convoluted loop to get there. Well, not loop, but more of a U-turn. But we're finally well on our way. Eventually. Yeah, I don't even know what to say about this space area. It's so boring and pointless. But here we go. Finally, the start of Space Station 2. Now, when I first started playing VVVVVV seriously, I thought that this stage was going to be my first stage in a no-death mode. It's the longest stage, and it probably stands out as the most difficult because it has some very difficult trinkets to get, such as Vidi Vidi Vici and the second trinket, which I can never remember the name of, but it's very difficult. This screen is easy, by the way, just hold forward the entire time. Now here you can go up or down, and I go up because this sets up the last screen to be easier. Which I'll demonstrate here. If you just hold forward here, then that platform is lined up perfectly, and you're carried to safety. Anyway, what I discovered through practice is that this stage actually isn't very difficult. Most of the rooms don't have much threat on them individually. It's just a long stage. And really, a no-death mode is going to be a long run through the game anyway. So the fact that the stage is long doesn't make it any more difficult than any other stage would be in a game in a playthrough like this. So since the individual obstacles aren't very difficult, I started moving this stage back and forth more and more. Now, to be fair, I guess I should mention that since I started with this, oh hey there, fuck you Vermilion. Since I started practicing no death mode with this stage as the first stage, I got the most practice on it. So maybe I'm just a bit biased, I don't know. By the way, falling through the gap there is pretty difficult without getting hit by the lies. But if you start moving left immediately when you enter that room, then you'll fall down through them just fine. This room is kind of annoying, mostly because the platform moves pretty quickly, and it's knocked me into the spikes a couple of times. Not fun. Slipping through the crack here is actually easier than doing the screen the intended way. Who would have thought? And at this point, I've pretty much completed the difficult portions of this stage. There's only a few difficult screens, and they're gone. Everything else is really just a test in keeping my nerves on straight, which I guess is the main reason that this stage being difficult might be, this stage being long might be a bit more difficult. This room is actually one of the most nerve-wracking in the game, because those jumps do not take care of themselves. You can't just hold forward and flip at the right time to complete that room. You gotta do each jump individually. And there's a lot of them. So it is just a little bit nerve-tearing. Anyway, we're almost done here. I've actually died on that last room before. Lots of fun. So, on to Intermission 2. And this is everyone's favorite part of the game. Or at least everyone who's ever tried to do a no-death mode run-through. In fact, the Gravitron is, by and large, the main brick wall that prevents the average serious player from completing a no-death run. In the regular game, you have to survive for 60 seconds, but you get a save point every 5 seconds, and I imagine that most players use almost all of them on almost every playthrough of the game. What makes the Gravitron so difficult is that Captain Viridian is moving vertically the entire time, and as we've discussed before, vertical movement in this game is much faster than horizontal movement. It's the fastest movement speed you can get. And you have to do this while dodging enemies that, for the most part, are random. Now, there is a greater general pattern that they follow. They start moving to the right, and then there's a pattern to the right, and then there's a pattern to the left. But here is where everything is thrown out the window. Because these, you see there's a general pattern here of enemies coming from both sides, but they're very randomized beyond that. And I have to be able to read them and react to them properly, and be able to move Viridian to where he needs to be without dying. And without getting blocked off. It's much, much more difficult than it looks. Go give it a try yourself if you don't believe me. The rest of the stage is completely static, but it's actually quite tricky. You need to know exactly what to do to survive the static waves. You're not really going to be able to do it by ear. So, I've completed the Gravitron. Yay! The Gravitron is immensely difficult. I mean, I can't really stress that point enough. I died on it countless times in no death mode, and I only made it past the Gravitron 3 times. That's why I'm stopping here and resting. I need a moment to catch my breath, to collect my thoughts, to stretch a bit, grab a drink of water, and compose myself to continue onward with the game. Every time I made it past the Gravitron was a triumph, and every time I died past the Gravitron was a complete and utter disaster. So, on to the laboratory. It is the closest level to the starting point of the game, and I'm pretty sure it's the first level you're intended to go through. It's the shortest and it's the easiest. It's not super trivial or anything, but there's nothing particularly difficult in it. There aren't very many fast-paced sections, and it's short. And a lot of the screens just take care of themselves if you just run forward like this. And the screen density in terms of threat tends to be pretty low too. Now, I saved the easiest level for last, because of course, I wanted to make sure that every time I got past the Gravitron, I had a fair shake at the final area of the game. The final area being a complete nightmare. These 2 gaps right here are actually fairly tricky. They require a good bit of timing, and they're narrower than they look because of Viridian's fast vertical movement speed. Fuck you, Vermilion. I think that's the last fuck you, Vermilion. I'm not sure. You can actually get one more fuck you, Vermilion, if you do the warp zone after rescuing him, but fuck you, Vermilion. Anyway, this next screen gives a lot of people trouble, but if you stop right in between the enemies there, that's all you have to do. Everything is lined up perfectly. The trinket above this area is, of course, a nightmare and makes getting the V rank on this stage very difficult, but I managed to pull it through via the power of muscle memory. And we're done. We've only got one more area of the game left to do. And, as with any proper gameplay design, the final level is the most difficult by far. That's why I've stopped here again, because I need another moment to catch my breath and make sure I am mentally ready to proceed with the final stage. I need to keep momentum up, I need to keep my muscle memory going. So when the stage starts, I need to go and I need to not stop. If I stop, I have to get my muscle memory going again, and that will increase the risk of dying. Let's do it! Well, let's do it after this fanfare here. I haven't mentioned this yet, but these fanfares are annoying. They take up like 10 seconds each, and it's time you're just sitting there not playing the game, which on a no-death run isn't very fun. So nothing too bad so far, these screens take care of themselves. This one pretty much does too if you just hold the right direction. If you keep moving, then you can stop in the middle here every time. But things get tricky here. I actually died on the next screen twice in no death mode, which was some sort of Shakespearean tragedy that will haunt the rest of my life forever. But if I make it past those screens, which are very tricky, much trickier than they look, the rest of the first half here isn't too difficult. There's tricks I can use to make a lot of the screens easier, and this screen is kind of weird and disorienting, but if you know what you're doing, it's not bad. And finally, these screens here take care of themselves. But we're done with that, because we're about to enter the final portion of the game, which is a complete nightmare. And that's why I'm stopping just a moment to compose myself once more. Because again, once I start moving, I'm not going to let myself stop. I'm actually freaking the fuck out here when I'm playing the game. My heart rate is going at some absurd speed, and I'm incredibly nervous. In fact, the final area of the game here is pretty much a blur in my memory. All I really know is that I started playing it, and I beat it. The bottom of this room here is a complete clusterfuck. I was sure I would lose in no death mode here, but I didn't. And the same can apply this entire screen. But thanks to the wonders of muscle memory and my consciousness being a blur, I managed to get through it somehow. Yay! This room can be trivialized. I didn't know that when I did this run through, but it's not too hard. And finally we get the panic room, which means I can take a breath. Finally, because the last 5 screens or so have all been among the most difficult in the game without a break. But that's it, that's our final break, because we've got some difficult stuff ahead of us. Now, I said stuff, but there's actually only one difficult part of the final challenge, right here. That jump is very tricky, but it's burned so deep into my muscle memory I can do it every time. And we're pretty much done. Just gotta make sure I don't do something horribly stupid and die in this final part. And I almost had a heart attack here. When you play the final stage in time trial mode, when you grab that trinket at the end, it doesn't pop up a message or pause the game at all. So when I was playing in no death mode, I grabbed that trinket and my muscle memory hit the flip button as soon as I grabbed the trinket to flip up through the final gap. But then the message popped up and all movement stopped and I freaked out. I thought I had hit the flip button too early and that I was going to careen into the spikes above my head and die at literally the last possible moment in a no death mode run. That would have been horrifying. But thankfully, that didn't happen, and I'm still alive because I didn't commit suicide after that happened. So let's go take a look at that trophy. I hope it's special, because that was a complete pain in the ass to get. Oh, there are all my V-mode trophies, or V-rank trophies. I'm disappointed. I was hoping for something better. This is kind of lame. Well, whatever. I completed no death mode.